Transportation Committee for April 10th, 2023. Our first order of business tonight is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? If not, we can assume the agenda is approved and move on to approval of the Transportation Committee meeting minutes. These are the minutes from March 27th, 2023. Did anyone have any changes or additions? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the minutes are approved. Now we're on to reports. Our first report this evening is MTS, and we have Amy Benowitz here to present.
Madam Chair and members, I am happy to pass tonight. It's been a good, slow 2 weeks for us, so nothing to report on behalf of Charles today.
Very good. Any questions, comments? All right, then we will move to Metro Transit, and we have Acting General Manager Kinderis.
Thank you, Chair Barber, council members. Just one brief update for Metro Transit tonight. At your next meeting, we are planning to bring you an information item on our Community Affairs Department, which includes our approach to outreach and public engagement. But since we're not going to get to that information item until next week, I just wanted to mention one active engagement set of opportunities we have right now, and that's relating to our Network Now project. Our Network Now effort is our process for developing a plan for the next 5 years where we're going to really engage with community, with riders, and understand the needs and interests in our current transit system. And that's going to help shape a decision-making framework as we hope to improve and rebuild service as more resources such as additional operators are available to us. A couple weeks ago, we put an online survey out in the world, and this week is really when we're kicking off the in-person events, actually both in-person and virtual events. It's going to start with a series of meetings with agency partners this week, and then starting next week, we're going to have events more targeted towards community members, again, both in person and virtually. So we wanted that to be on your radar, you to be aware that we're out in community and engaging with partners on that topic. And again, we'll come back at your next meeting and talk more in depth about that project and other engagement efforts underway. So with that, Madam Chair, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Leslie. Questions or comments from council members? All right, thank you. Now, normally we have our Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee report. Unfortunately, Mr. Paulson couldn't make it here this evening. He had some troubles with his transportation. And so he will report next in 2 weeks when we come back. So we will then move on to our business items. There are no items on consent this evening, so we're going to move to our first business item, which is business item 2023-80. It's right-of-way acquisition loan repayment from City of Bloomington and write-off for parcels of south of I-494, and we have Tony Fischer here to present.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to be here, Chair and council members. My name is Tony Fischer. I'm a transportation planner in MTS. I use him and his pronouns, and you're welcome to address me as Tony or Mr. Fischer, as you like. Some of the council members saw some of the introduction, the background on this program in December, and I'm going to repeat some of that today to support the business item that I'll end with this presentation touching on. So this is a program created by the Minnesota legislature. It's a revolving loan fund. That fund was established through a council levy. It provides interest-free loans to cities and counties to purchase right-of-way that's needed for future highway improvement projects. And it's only eligible on state highways or principal arterials. And it was really envisioned back in the era when we were building new highways like 610, when before 212 was built, things like that. Nowadays, it's a little bit different program. So when we look for proposals for this loan program, we're really looking for projects that aren't funded. If they're funded, they have the resources to purchase the right-of-way they need. And we're looking for projects that are within the planning horizon, so usually within the TPP timeframe. We're looking at properties that are at risk of appreciating, a lot of times because of redevelopment or first-time development is anticipated. And then we're, of course, looking at them for consistency with the region's transportation policy plan. And we do require that the property is shown on officially mapped highway improvement project. And the current program requirements were adopted by the council in 2014. So the council's role is really in 3 points of this program, and there's a fourth outcome that we don't come to council for. So when new loans are proposed to be given to a city or county, we would bring that as a business item before you for your action. And then in 2 cases of repayments, we would also come to you for approval. One would be for a partial loan repayment. That'd be a case where a small part of parcel is needed for the highway improvement, but the rest of it either will not be needed for highway improvements or will be needed for future highway improvements at another time. And then also we'll come to council, as in the case today, when a full parcel or parcels are no longer needed for highway improvements and are proposed to be sold. And then the one case where we don't come to council is the intent of the program, which is where generally MnDOT is purchasing the property at the loan value, and they're going to be using that for the highway improvement. So that's really what the loan agreement's intended for. The original action approving a loan is pointing towards, and so in those cases, we're just following through on those actions. So there is less interest in the program in recent years. There's just less use of additional right-of-way for highway improvements. I'm not aware of any new highway improvements, new highways that are planned. And so it ends up being a lot of corner lots for interchange improvements. For example, the only 2 loans given in the last 5 years were to the City of Lakeville for planned improvements of an interchange at I-35 and County Road 50. And that totaled about $1.8 million to the City of Lakeville. So we're really not giving out a lot of loans. We're more in collecting repayments from the loans, whether those are being used for highway projects or determined no longer to be needed. So a couple of other repayments that we saw this winter, City of Anoka, you can see that business item referred to a partial repayment, and then there were 2 full loan repayments. And then the City of Ramsey, also for Highway 10 improvements, that business item refers to a partial repayment. And then 3 full loan repayments occurred this winter from the City of Ramsey. So just a status report. At the end of last year, we had 46 outstanding loans totaling about $33 million and approximately $25 million in cash investments. In 2023, we do anticipate future actions. The City of Shoreview is working to develop a parcel at 694 on Rice Street that has a Ralph loan on it. It has $5.2 million outstanding, and we are currently awaiting an appraisal that will determine the sales price. And that is, statute actually refers to the value of the property being the repayment price. So, and then also Maple Grove's expecting to repay almost $3 million related to the 610 extension project. So that's what we've got coming up outside of today's action. There can also be surprises, of course. So we all are, also on the books are approximately $7.3 million on 20 loans to the City of Lakeville in Bloomington for improvements that we do anticipate happening in the future. And there's a sizable number of loans that we want to have conversations with MnDOT, our city partners, about if those are really needed for future highway improvements or not. And those are 18 loans totaling $16 million, kind of spread out throughout the region. So some future work this program needs to accomplish. You know, really our first priority is responding to requests for new loans and project repayments, just kind of keeping those projects moving and really keeping that program running. We'd also like to, as I mentioned before, we'd like to work with MnDOT to determine which of the outstanding loans are no longer needed for future highway right-of-way. We want to seek repayment in those cases where they won't be needed and really get those back out to the public. There's no reason to hold those if they won't be needed for future highway improvements. And then we are developing a sizable cash balance in the program. As I said, we're seeing more repayments and fewer loan requests, so that cash balance is growing. And so in the future, we just want to start having conversations about what if there might be better uses for some of those funds. Okay. So I want to get closer to the business item, kind of one slide to set it up and then one slide to get into the details of the business item before you. So this business item does present to you a loss on the Ralph program, and I would just want to touch on why that might be the case. So as I mentioned, there are three possible outcomes for a Ralph loan. If it's needed for a highway project, we are selling it to MnDOT. We're being repaid the full loan amount precisely. So that's an easy one. In the case of part of the parcel being needed for highway improvement, we are accepting a prorated part of the loan repayment in proportion to the part of the property needed. And then the case before you is this third item here, this third possibility here, where it's not needed for a highway project. And we really do start out with MnDOT making that determination, along with conversations with our partners, but really MnDOT's primary there. And then we ask the city or holder of the loan to have an appraisal conducted on the property so we know what the value is. And then we come to you for approval of that sale based on the appraisal. So there's language in statute that points us in the direction that we're proposing today, but I think the loan agreements that we have with the City of Bloomington in this case are much clearer. And they say in part that the recipient shall repay the council the fair market value of the property as determined by sale of the property, upon which payment of the specified amount, the council will discharge the loan. So I'll go into the business item before you. Here you can see the green highlighted parcels on the map are the parcels that have these loans on them in the City of Bloomington. The other parcels are being held for future highway improvements. This business item would authorize us, staff, to accept $549,000 on the 5 loans. That is the sum of the appraised values on the 5 parcels, but it would trigger a significant loss in the loan fund. And some of the reasons that might be the case is market timing. These were purchased really before the real estate market fell. Some of that might have recovered, but that's at least part of the story here. There also existed single-family homes on each of these parcels at the time they were purchased, and those were either moved or demolished, but no longer exist on the parcels. So another reason that these properties have lower value. And then the loans do include transaction costs at the time, closing costs, appraisals, things like that. So there are a number of reasons that the value is less than the original loan amount, and I think staff feels that the loan agreement is clear on the outcome that we're proposing before you. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. Could you share well, you did say that there are 48 properties with a value of 32.9 outstanding to be repaid. Did you share what would be programmed to be repaid in a year, i.e. in 2023?
Chair, council members, so we don't plan it out that specifically. We're working with our partners on a number of things, and the ones that we expect to be repaid are beyond what's in front of you today is really that the Shoreview parcel and one in Maple Grove.
So those are all that are coming in.
Chair, council members, that's what we're anticipating. It could be that if we're able to reach agreement with MnDOT and our local partners on some other parcels that aren't needed and appraisals can be conducted, that could happen before the end of the year. But
So when these loans are let, they are not dependent upon a repayment plan at that time.
correct. The intent is that this isn't a really long-term loan, but once the loan's given, it is held until the project, the improvements come along.
All right, thank you. And there is no, in statute, we are required to accept a payout at market value, and that's determined by the sale. It's not determined by an amount that could be received, i.e. we don't have to hold out for a highest bidder.
Chair and council members, so statute is, does point to the market value as the sales price. So we wouldn't be able to authorize a sale that isn't based on market value.
But we can authorize any sale that is based on market value. We don't have to put it out for bid or,
Chair and council members, correct. In a lot of cases, after an appraisal, we would ask the local agency to put that on the market for competitive process. In this case, the City of Bloomington wants to transfer that ownership to a, I believe the intent is to go to Habitat for Humanity, and the business item described a grant that they received from the Met Council through the local housing LHIA program that supports affordable housing.
all right. So that is at the behest of the city, in this case, to determine and to convey.
Chair and council members, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, just a quick question. So if we bought the property, if we have the property, we're basically holding it for someone else, who determines whether we should tear the houses down and therefore lose value off the top?
Chair and council members, let me clarify that usually the city, in one case, a county owns a property, but for the most part, the city buys the property with a loan from us. And then in some cases, the city would choose to rent that out, to lease that out, but statute directs them to forward any net proceeds to the council's RELF fund. And so there's no benefit to the city to do that. And the intent, when we propose a loan to you, we're talking to MnDOT and the cities and the counties, and everybody is under the standing that this parcel is going to be needed for a highway improvement. So by doing that demolition, moving that building, it lowers the strain on the city of maintaining that property, and it's preparing it for that highway improvement. I think 3 decades ago, highways went through a kind of a generational shift where there used to be a lot of property purchased for highway expansion, and more recently for financial reasons, to minimize impacts, there's just a lot less highway property being purchased, and therefore we're in this kind of once-in-a-lifetime moment where there is excess property that's not needed.
Additional questions, comments? I just say, in additional, often the properties that are here are often, like the landowners or somebody also knows that there's anticipated building, and it's usually a fairly amicable agreement about doing this. And so it allows the local jurisdictions to purchase some of those lands ahead of time before the roads and infrastructure will go in. So that's sort of the theory behind the program. That helps. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-80.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Cameron. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morales. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you, Tony. Next, we're on to 3 business items. It's business item 2023-24, 25, and 26, which all concern the Metro Blue Line extension. We have a presentation for all 3, and so we'll hear the presentation, and we'll take individual actions on each of the individual items. And we have Nick Thompson and Chris Beckwith here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. Nick Thompson, Deputy General Manager, Capital Programs, Metro Transit, he, him pronouns.
Hi, I'm Chris Beckwith. I'm the project director for the Blue Line Extension Project. I use she, hers pronouns, and happy to be here today.
So, Madam Chair, Committee, before we get going, I just want to lay a little context about these items as it relates to the Transitway Advancement Policy that was adopted last fall by the council. That was really around making major decisions as transitway projects advance and kind of understanding what the risks are in making those decisions for advancing a project. And so tonight, you're going to hear about 3 business items to award contracts that essentially will advance the Blue Line further. And we're still working on development of that policy and what the enterprise risks are for the council in general. It's a process that we knew we'd be advancing projects at the same time we're working on this policy and process. And so the actions tonight will really be around taking incremental advancements of the project while we still have time to deal with and talk about as a council our enterprise risks. And so Chris will talk about how we're limiting the risks in the actions tonight. And also that in the next couple months you'll come before you is a capital grant agreement for this project with Hennepin County as the local funder. And we anticipate that that'll give us a little more time to work with you as the council on what enterprise risks and understanding what the risks are in advancing projects. But also, it's also the capital grant agreement is an avenue for really coming to agreement with funding partner about who manages the risks, where risks are assigned. And so we'll talk about that. So I just wanted to start tonight saying that we're very aware of the Transway Advancement Policy. We've thought about it in terms of these items, and we're presenting these items in a way that allows us to continue to award these contracts, move forward if you vote for them, but also really limits the risk to the council in the short term while we still work out on this policy.
Chair and committee members, again, I'm Chris Beckwith. I'm going to take you through a short presentation here that will actually combine all three of these items together in one presentation, which you'll see why in a moment, and then we'll go through the items individually as far as the actions go. So let's start off with a project update. So this is the Blue Line Light Rail Transit Extension. It's located fully in Hennepin County, and it travels through the communities of Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park, serving the Northwest Metro. This happens to serve some of the most racially, culturally, and economically diverse communities in Hennepin County. This project will provide a one-seat ride to jobs, to opportunities, and a one-seat ride all the way down to the Airport and Mall of America, connecting with the original Blue Line. So at this point in time, we are expanding upon a project that started back in 2014. We completed an environmental impact statement process in 2015, and that was when the prior alignment for this project was along BNSF freight corridor. And after several years of unsuccessful negotiations to move the project forward under that alignment, the parties, the Hennepin County as the local funder and the Met Council decided to go back to the drawing board and look at alternative alignments that did not use freight rail corridor. So in June of 2022, the alignment you see presented here is what was acted on by policymakers to move forward into a supplemental draft environmental impact statement and a final supplemental draft environmental impact statement. There are a couple decisions still to be made that will be evaluated in that process, but this is generally the alignment we're moving forward with. We have extensive public engagement ongoing, including an anti-displacement work group. We will look forward to hearing next month, so in May, we will hear recommendations from the anti-displacement work group that we can incorporate into this project. And we'll move forward with hopefully a policy decision on some alignment options in the summertime. This is showing our project schedule. So federally funded transitway projects move through a number of key steps along a multi-year project life cycle. So this is very similar to what you've seen in the Green Line, the original Green Line extension, the Blue Line, the Gold Line underway. We all have to move through the same gates here. So the yellow box around the green headed section here is the step we're in right now. So as I mentioned, we're doing our environmental review. We will need to seek municipal consent from our local communities in the county before moving out of this phase. We have begun engineering. We're still moving towards a 30% later this year, but really at probably a 5% design right now, and actively working on station area planning as well. So after this phase, after we request municipal consent, we can hopefully move forward into the next phase to complete our construction plans and then into the construction phase after that. So although our work over the next year or so will determine our actual opening day, right now we're thinking somewhere around the 2029 timeframe as an opening day if everything moves forward on schedule. So this project is part of the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program, the CIG program. It is a New Starts project. So new starts are those projects that are greater than 400 million or that have no more than 150 million in capital investment grant funds. Blue Line is one of 4 projects nationally currently in this engineering phase. One of them is the Gold Line, locally here. Another one is the New York 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2 and the Charleston Low Country Rapid Transit Project. So only 4 in the nation, half of them are here in the Twin Cities. So as we finalize our route, we'll be able to complete the capital cost estimates and update those as well as ridership forecasts. We don't have those right now. We will have some comparative analyses published in our environmental document, but we don't have the route. Without the route, we can't finish and update the cost estimate. So that'll be some of the next steps we take, completing that environmental and the engineering, updating our costs, our schedule, our ridership forecasts. We will request a project rating from the Federal Transit Administration, and that'll happen in the summer of 2024 when we've got all of the technical analysis and design work completed. And then along the way, we'll be updating our risk assessment. We do that regularly as well. So FTAs have been a great partner, very supportive of our transitway work. We have a couple of decades of experience working with the Federal Transit Administration, delivering many successful projects together. Their bipartisan infrastructure law is really boosting the funding they have. They're looking forward to funding good projects like the Blue Line. So we look forward to being a great partner with the FTA as well. So today's business items, there are 3 that we'll be presenting. They are all for contract awards for 3 different types of scopes of work for professional services. I did want to flag that upcoming there will be another business item. As Nick mentioned, the capital grant agreement with Hennepin County and the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority, also known as HCRA. There will be a grant agreement that we are currently negotiating with them that will address a number of other key points with the project as well: financial risk, governance, and process. So today's business items are for award of the contract and a limited notice to proceed, utilizing the funding we have under the current agreements, and then we'll be back before you in a couple of months here to bring the follow-on agreement through for your consideration. And I'll point out several times how this aligns with your actions today. So I wanted to go through the request for proposals process because this was a little bit unique, this approach we took. We did a single request for proposals, an RFP, that was issued in August of 2022, but we had 3 parts, A, B, and C, and I'll talk about what those 3 parts were, or are. The proposers could propose on any or all of the parts, and we indicated we would issue 1, 2, 3, or no contracts, so it could be anywhere up to 3 contracts for the work. So the 3 parts we had, Part A covered just the engineering services scope, so it's preliminary and final design. Then we separated under Part B, the project management services scope. A big part of that is project controls, which includes cost estimating, scheduling. We have outreach and engagement included in that, the capital investment grant, so the FTA program submittals, safety and security, and the quality oversight of the whole project. And then the third part was risk management services scope, which was risk management, peer reviews, value engineering, and constructability, as shown there. And I'm going to talk in a couple slides about how separation of the scope mitigates the risk that we might have encountered had we just had one RFP. So to summarize how the interest we had in the proposals, we had 8 proposals that were received across those 3 scopes of work, A, B, and C. There was 52 registered plan holders. There were 24 that were identified as minority, small, veteran, or disadvantaged business enterprises. We had a DBE goal ranging from 18 to 19%, and all 3 of the contracts met the DBE contract requirements. I wanted to also let you know that for Part A, we have in the contract that we're bringing forward tonight, we had 16 subs. 10 of those were DBEs. On Part A, we have 12 subs. 10 of those are DBEs. And on Part C, we have 8 subcontractors, and 7 of those are DBEs. So there's quite a few contractors represented in these 3 parts, these 3 contracts that we're bringing forward tonight. So to touch a bit on contract risk considerations, as I mentioned, we separated the scopes of work to, which led to more consultant interest in proposing on the work. Had we done one RFP with no parts, we may have had one proposer. By separating it, we had more interest. We did a lot of discussions with our contracting community, and we really did get some excellent proposals that came through in that process. So the contracts with the three different consulting firms, so the fact that we're choosing to do three separate ones mitigates risks in the following way. So that contract A is just design and engineering by itself. Contract B then separates out the cost estimating. They will do cost estimating and oversight of contract A. So we're separating those two scopes of work as risk mitigation to identify some risk that we've encountered on projects in the past. And then the third contract can provide oversight to the prior two as well. Risk management is separate. You've got checks and balances of a third contractor, a third consultant that's overseeing the other two, doing a peer review, doing constructability, doing cost estimates if we need a second set of eyes on our cost estimates. So we feel like this really mitigates risk that we have seen in other contracts and kind of separates it out into those three scopes. So as I mentioned, our approach would be limited notices to proceed, LNTPs, and I worked on 4 new starts projects here locally, and we've used LNTPs on every single one. What this allows us to do is issue an LNTP for the work that we have funding for. So in this case, we're requesting to issue 3 LNTPs that align with the funding that we already have from the counties in the current capital grant agreement. Then that'll allow us some time to complete the rest of the work in negotiating the next capital grant agreement to issue further follow-on LNTPs. So each of the contracts will extend through 2030, but we can terminate any of those contracts at any time. So our contracts do include provisions for us to terminate. So there is an exit strategy, there's an exit ramp if we execute these contracts. And then lastly, the Met Council will act again prior to a full funding grant agreement and prior to us entering into the construction phase. So we're seeking really to authorize about 9% of the contract work in today's action, and then you'll be seeing us again in the future. I wanted to just close by just showing graphically what I've gone through. So the 3 blue dots show the proposal, the RFP process, when we received the proposals, evaluated, completed those negotiations, then you see that red stop sign is where we are today. Transportation Committee and Met Council award actions for your consideration. If approved, we would issue that LNTP in May. We would continue negotiating our next capital grant agreement and then proceed with the engineering phase if you approve that agreement as well. And then you'll be seeing us again before we enter the construction phase for another action. Okay, so the very first proposed action I want to go through is business item 2023-2024. And I did want to mention that all 3 of these actions are funded by the existing capital grant agreements with Hennepin County and HICRA under project 61403. And when we bring the future capital grant agreement forward, we would go through a capital budget amendment process to bring those funds in as well. So the proposed action before you for this business item is that the Met Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the engineering services consultant contract 22P103A with Kimley Horn and Associates for consultant services for the Metro Blue Line in an amount not to exceed $96,375,448 and to issue limited notice to proceed number 1 in an amount of $9.3 million. And I'll stand for any questions on this first business item.
Thank you, Chris and Nick. Questions and comments? Councilmember Cameron, and then we'll go. And if everyone can go through the chair, because I'm expecting a lot of questions. So I want to make sure everyone gets to ask them. Go ahead, Cameron.
I had a question, and this relates to all 3 business items before us, and that is for the DBE subcontractors, are those relationships through the contractor, or does Met Council staff play a role in facilitating those relationships with DBE subcontractors in any capacity to allow more to enter into the field and meet our goals?
Madam Chair and Councilmember, so the question is, are the DBEs managed through the prime contractor or are they managed directly through the council?
The initiation of the relationship between the DBEs and the contractor, does that initiation happen through the contractor? Or is there a facilitation that happens through the council?
Yes, excellent question. So as part of the RFP process, we do facilitate DBE mixers and opportunities for the prime contractors to connect with disadvantaged business enterprises to facilitate that so that they are able to meet their goal. So that was done earlier in the process. And then they do hold the contracts with the DBEs. Of course, we're working directly. They're part of our team, so we work really closely with the DBEs as well.
And can I ask a follow-up? Do you have a sense of how successful those mixers or that facilitation is? I don't know if you have a specific success rate of how many go on to be contract vendors for projects, for these three particular projects.
Madam Chair and Council Member, so we'd have to get those statistics back to you. I don't have that right offhand, but I can say that we were successful in each of these contracts meeting the DBE goal. So we are seeing good success in meeting the goals that are being set.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having served in the work group that had a lot of conversations about the issue related to risks, first, I appreciate the way this is being presented to us tonight. But I have a kind of a really basic question to ask, and it's how much do we spend, how much do we spend before we get to the point of really assessing risks? With a fiscal cliff looming in the next 3-4 years for us financially, how much can we afford to spend between now and then, and how much of that money we're spending exacerbates that fiscal cliff?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, that's a great question. You know, I think as we were developing the risks over the past several months, the financial risks were a core question raised by council members about, you know, not just do we have the funding for an action like tonight, but what is the long-term risks that the council is accepting if they build projects? So in the short term, these actions tonight are fully funded by Hennepin County. And so we're only proceeding, we're asking to proceed with the amount of money that we have available to the project. But we do want to, you know, before you take the big, you know, the next step, maybe the capital grant agreement, talk about here's some of the long-term costs that we didn't forecast for maybe capital maintenance. We have good estimates of operating costs. I think there's definitely a desire to not just talk about the funding for the actions, but the long-term. And I think that's what we owe to bring to the council on this project and other projects about what, you know, if the project advances through construction, what other financial costs is the council actually accepting by doing that? And so for tonight, we limited to only the actions that are fully funded, and it doesn't commit the council to construction or those long-term costs. But that's a future decision the council, we want you to be very aware, you know, we want to be very transparent about what other, when you get to that point, particularly like entering construction, what are you really accepting in terms of long-term costs? And we're prepared to share that information.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any local opposition to the route as it's currently proposed?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, with any project there is opposition. We are doing extensive outreach, and we're hearing those voices right now, which is important. Not everybody has to agree with the alignment, and we want to hear from those voices and make sure that we're recording that comment and bringing that forward to our policymakers for follow-on decisions. There was an extensive route modification process that was actually done a couple of years ago and concluded last summer with the route modification you saw on the first slide. And so that also had extensive outreach associated with it as well, and was supported by, you know, policymakers as we move forward with that alignment through North Minneapolis. It seems that, you know, we're, like I said, making extensive efforts to reach the community, and we are reaching the community because we're hearing even more of those voices going forward.
And Madam Chair, I had to, you know, in this decision-making process, there is a corridor management committee that will be asked to support the final route that is represented by the communities along the corridor. There'll be a municipal consent where we'll need, for a project to advance, it needs to get approval at the city level of each city. So there are many steps in this process still ahead where community support needs to be registered as for the project to be advanced on the final route.
Councilmember Vento.
One more. Having had, although it wasn't a light rail transit project, it's a BRT project that has gone through a lot of discussion and rediscussion and rediscussion. Can't be overstated, let me tell you. I have concerns about making sure that it's not just up to the Met Council to garner the support, that the county and the cities, or the counties and the cities, in projects, whether it's transit or any other project, but for sure transit, that they're with us, working with us on this. I think it leaves us at risk of becoming the target of everyone's anger when they don't like something that, frankly, has been handed to us by the county or counties and cities. So I appreciate the outreach we're doing, but I really think it's very important that the county and the cities are a part of that as well. I don't ever want to stand in the way of progress, but sometimes how we make our decisions, how we engage, where we engage, when we engage, makes it more difficult for us. And we could make some simple well, probably not simple, but we could make some changes in the process that might help us. And this isn't directed to you two. Frankly, it's directed to us as a council to come up with a way for well, it'll never be smooth, but maybe a cleaner sort of process to get from Plan A to completion of what it is that folks envision for their region. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, council members, I'll just add, we are doing this project differently in several key ways. Number one, the county is a local funding. They are embedded in the organizational, staffing organizational structure. Chris pioneered that on the Gold Line when she led the Gold Line, and that's really led to a very big, different change in terms of key decisions. But also the capital grant agreement that you'll be seeing has governance language and structure built into that is being negotiated to make sure, your very point, that it's not just the council, it's the county is a local funder that's part of that decision. And then I think their Transway advancement policy also was really about that issue, is like making sure the decisions are made and that there's support for the decisions before we advance it a stage. And so I think you're gonna see a much different approach on this project. It'll be, I think, really setting this gold standard for that issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento.
And this is the final one, I
Okay.
promise. Thank you for articulating that, Nick. And I want to note that Washington County and Ramsey County have been great partners with the Gold Line. Ramsey's been a great partner with the Purple Line. That particular line has not been an easy one for anybody, but Ramsey has been terrific on it. And I just want to stress for all of us that one of the huge factors here, and Nick, you talked about it, but it can't be stressed enough, is that elections have consequences. And when they occur at the local level, they can have major consequences. And many times those are the elections that nobody's paying attention to.
All right, Councilmember Dokar.
So can you share what were the concerns on the route? And if so, has there been any work done to address them?
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair, Councilmember. So as I mentioned earlier, there's an anti-displacement work group. That is just one example of how things are being done differently. So one of the major concerns is displacement. Business displacement, business impacts, property displacement, and disrupting the fabric of the community. So that is a great example of how we are doing things differently. And we're looking forward to getting those recommendations next month and starting to implement those right at the right time. So that's one example. I would say that there's just concerns about impacts to people's property. There's a concern that the route is going into an area just to bring people right through North Minneapolis. One of our project goals and our drivers is we are trying to invest in a community that is traditionally being divested in. North Minneapolis is losing they lost their grocery store, their pharmacy, they're losing businesses right now. We're trying to invest back into the community with transit. It is a driver it's an economic driver. And I think the statistic is for every dollar invested, you can get $5 back on economic, investment back. So that's what we're doing this project, trying to reinvest in a community that needs this kind of an investment. So it can be challenging to work through the right way to do that. We've just had some excellent conversations with those communities, with those neighborhoods. It's really, it's kind of, the whole team just really is taking that to heart. We're making sure that we're recording that we're putting that into our documents, that we're letting our policymakers know what the concerns are, and really trying to hear those voices when they come through, so that people feel valued. Their opinion does matter, and their comments do matter. So I would say, just in summary, that anti-displacement's a great example, and just the ongoing outreach. We did have a route that was originally going to be proposed in that June decision, and we added a few more options to study in Minneapolis. It's another example of where we heard from the community that they wanted us to continue to study a couple of options, so we went back to the drawing board, and we've got a couple of options we're looking at now. We really are trying to be reactive to the comments that we're getting through the community.
Councilmember?
Can I do a follow-up? Thank you. Can you, just going back to the map, can you show me or show us which routes we're talking about?
Absolutely.
And I sort of made the assumption based on what you previously stated that maybe the routes were decided. So what I'm understanding now is that there are portions within North Minneapolis area where the routes are not decided, and you're still studying the route with the communities. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, yes. If you look on the very bottom of the map here, you'll see an area where there's a couple of different shaded lines. We've got some pink and some purple in there. And that's the area where we are studying a couple of different options between Target Field and then when we get up to kind of West Broadway where it starts to go to the northwest. We've got two options to get from Target Field up to that West Broadway. One of them goes on the Lyndale Avenue route, and one of them goes east of 94. And then either one of those would cross 94, and then they would connect up to either West Broadway or one block to the north, 21st Avenue. So what we will do is study all four of those options in the environmental document and do the analysis of all four of those options in that environmental document. We would also, the FTA would look to us to have a policy recommendation for which of those two routes are preferred. So that would be indicated in the document, and then there would be a public comment period to reflect back on that.
Councilmember Jacques.
Thank you. Could I ask a follow-up question? So will the anti-displacement work group study will have a full understanding of how many homes, businesses are going to be impacted by whichever route you end up deciding on?
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, so that it's not necessarily an outcome of the anti-displacement work group recommendations. That's kind of a different process that as we're doing the design, and we're fine-tuning things, we can kind of tell which businesses might be impacted. We're reaching out to those businesses and having conversations. We can tell which properties would either be a temporary easement during construction or a permanent easement. So we have that information and we're conveying that as we have it, but we're not done with the design. So what we try to do is avoid. So we're trying to, if we draw the line on the map and we see a bit of an impact, but we can make an adjustment in the engineering to avoid that, that's what we try to do, is just to avoid any of that property impact. So that's not part of anti-displacement, but it's a separate process.
Councilmember Dolkar.
Last question, I promise. Thank you. And so in terms of studying the four different alternatives, will Hennepin County and City of Minneapolis lead this with Met Council staff in terms of studying the different routes?
Yes, council members. So that is part of that supplemental draft environmental impact statement. That's where it will be fully analyzed from a technical perspective. But as Nick mentioned, we have a corridor management committee, and that includes Hennepin County commissioners. It includes staff from each of the four city, it's either a council member or mayor. And then there's MnDOT that's on that corridor management committee as well as some other groups locally. So they will actually make a recommendation on the route eventually. It'll be a policy-informed recommendation on which of those routes we'd move forward with. So yes, absolutely, Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis is at the table with us.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, I was just trying to get some insight into the anti-displacement work group. Is that a standing group that you have, or is that a group that's formulated per each project, or each project and then it's reconvenes along certain timelines? Just could you go into that?
Madam Chair, Council Member, it's the first time we've done this. It's the first anti-displacement work group we've had here in the Twin Cities. It might be kind of innovative nationally as well. I'm not sure that anybody's done anything quite like this. So it has met to reach this recommendations phase, but it will continue, so those recommendations will continue to inform the next steps. And one of the things that we've heard from that group is it's not about what happens now during the design phase, it's what happens now, it's what happens during construction, it's what happens afterwards. So it's studying kind of all three of those phases. It's not like we close the book now, we have the recommendations, and we never look back again. We need to keep measuring and looking at the impacts into the future. So that's part of the recommendations as well.
And how do you identify who's going to be a part of that group? Is there?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember, there was a process, that Hennepin County led process, where they contracted it. We took applications, and that was, so people applied to be on the board, and then there was representatives from agencies, staff from agencies along the corridor, including Met Council and Hennepin County and the city, and so there was a kind of a open process essentially through a contract administered for the University of Minnesota. And then I'll also add that, we anticipate that the outcomes of this will not be just limited to Blue Line. There'll be policy recommendations that will be applicable on other transit ways, and actions that could be taken by the council, by county, by cities, by state, by others too. So it's not, it's the first time we've done this, but we're not limiting it to Blue Line, the
So
outcomes.
this is a model that could go
Yes.
forward and be
Yep.
used in other
Correct.
instances.
And if I may, I will add, just having been at conferences where some of our anti-displacement work has been presented, it is something new to these types of projects, and it's really setting up a model for projects across the nation. And we're actually getting a lot of attention for it because we've really approached it differently and upfront instead of in the middle of projects as things are happening. So it's really something that's quite unique to this work, I think. So, additional questions or comments? Councilmember Vento.
Madam Chair, I sit on the management committee, and I watch these presentations over and over again, and it's very extensive, and I think it would have been helpful to have at least a slide or two on how the anti-displacement is working, how many workshops you've had, and there's examples of where during the pandemic they were meeting on the sidewalk or in the alleys by these houses, and so they couldn't get too close, but that didn't stop them from going out. So I think there's a lot more work that has been done in the communities and with the local officials and with the mayors, and that could be kind of highlighted a little more when we come to these points.
I promise we will have additional presentations on the anti-displacement work, how our engagement works, the transitway advancement policy. Unfortunately, we had certain things that had to move in a big agenda tonight, so we didn't want to go too far, but we did want to make sure we provided a baseline. But all of those are great ideas, and we'll make sure that we get more information items in front of this group so we can have bigger conversations around all of this.
Well, just one point there, and I think people are becoming more attuned to what's been going on because of the anti-displacement. There's other people raising questions, and I've got some from the Latino business community over there just because of my work with the chamber. And so it's not only what we're doing, it's what the county's doing, it's what the city's doing, but then what the neighborhoods are doing as well. So I think we'll be debating this for a while here.
Thank you, very good points. Councilmember Vento, did you?
Madam Chair, I was just going to ask that if it's possible to get updates, written updates on particular this anti-displacement piece as well as the community engagement. I would like to know how it's progressing, when things are getting resolved, what's left open, unresolved, what are the potential areas? And not that I want to wade into the weeds and interfere, but it would help me in terms of, and I think it would help everybody in terms of being prepared when we start receiving phone calls or emails.
Okay, additional questions or comments? All right, I have a couple of questions. So the first one is, we mentioned the current capital grant agreement. What date does that one go through?
Madam Chair, the current capital grant agreement goes through May 31st. It was just amended actually to extend to May. There is funding that would actually carry it another couple of months past that if amended.
And do we anticipate that action for amendment, that goes through the county, correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct. It doesn't, since it would be just a date extension and not adding any cost, it does not require council action, but it would go through the Hennepin County Board.
And we're not anticipating a long extension, we're anticipating moving towards the next capital grant agreement, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. It would be a month or two that it would be extended if we need that.
Thank you. And then during that time, all of this funding, this helps us keep moving, which is important, but all of this funding won't be expended during that time.
Madam Chair, that's correct. This would really get us through the end of June, this funding.
Perfect, thank you. And then the last question I had was related to the different contracts and the cost estimating one. I just want to highlight that one because that was one of the things that approach, even before the recommendation, I think, came from MnDOT, aligns with the peer review from MnDOT on Green Line extension, am I correct?
That is, Madam Chair, correct. This is directly an outcome of that process and feedback from a learning from Southwest LRT and a recommendation from MnDOT that, we're happy to, and it's good timing that we could implement it in this procurement.
Very good, thank you. One last time for any questions or comments? I just have a final comment. We know there's a ton of questions on this project. We know there's questions among council members. We know there's questions within the communities, but that's also why we need this incremental process and steps so that we can continue, so we can keep doing our due diligence, keep doing the work in the communities, and get the information that we ultimately need to make decisions on what's best for the communities and the businesses, and will ultimately be best for the project. Final call, questions, comments? All right, I am going to read each motion just because anyone who's listening. So the first one is business item 2023-24, which is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute or negotiate and execute the engineering services consultant contract 22P103A with Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated for consultant services for the Metro Blue Line Light Rail Transit Extension in an amount not to exceed $96,375,448 and issue limited notice to proceed number 1 in an amount of $9.3 million. That I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-24.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. All right, the next one is business item 2023-25, was that the Metropolitan Council authorized the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the project management services consultant contract 22P103B with WSP USA for consultant services for the Metro Blue Line Light Rail Transit Extension in an amount not to exceed $24,185,383 and to issue limited notice to proceed number 1 in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million. That I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-25.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. On to the last one It's business item 2023-26, that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the Risk Management Services Consultant Contract 22P103C with HDR Incorporated for consultant services for the Metro Blue Line Light Rail Transit Extension in an amount not to exceed $3,216,641 and issue limited notice to proceed number 1 in an amount not to exceed $240,000. With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-26.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales, seconded by Councilmember Tony Carter. All those in favor, or is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you very much, Nick and Chris. And like I said, they will be back to present more information to us on several things in the future. Next, we are on business item 2023-72, a same week item. It's the Metro B-Line authorization to award construction contract. We have Frank Elecron here to present.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members. My name is Frank Alarcon. I'm a project manager in the Arterial Bus Rapid Transit Department at Metro Transit. My pronouns are he, him, his, and you're welcome to call me Frank. I'm here to talk about the award of a construction contract for the Metro B-Line's East Construction Package. Business item 2023-72 requests that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 22P365 with Thomas & Sons Construction, Inc. for construction of the Metro B-Line East Construction Package in an amount not to exceed $18,681,581. And we are recommending a same-week action to ensure timely award of this contract and timely start of B-Line construction this spring. Could you advance the slide, please? Oh, that's on me?
Yep.
Thank you.
The joy that each room works different. Sorry.
So just to remind the committee which corridor the B-Line is, the B-Line is the Lake Marshall-Selby corridor, highlighted in red on this slide. It will be the 4th arterial bus rapid transit project in our region after the A-Line, the C-Line, and the D-Line, the last of which just opened last December. Like those other arterial BRT lines, the B-Line will substantially replace and upgrade one of our region's busiest bus routes, in this case, the Route 21, which is the region's second busiest local bus route. There are over 106,000 people living within a 10-minute walk or roll of the B-Line corridor. Over 40% of those individuals are BIPOC. And the B-Line is a fully funded project. It has been since October of 2020. It's about a $65 million project. Most of the funds for the B-Line come from state bonds, which are supplemented with some federal funds obtained through the regional solicitation process. The journey that has gotten the B-Line to this moment started in 2019 with planning. Engineering began in 2021 and is wrapping up this year, and construction will be about a 2-year process in 2023 and 2024, with B-Line service anticipated to begin at the end of 2024. The B-Line project will be delivered as largely as part of 2 major construction packages, what we call the East Package and the West Package. Today we're focused on the East Package, which will be the first of these 2 construction packages to be constructed. The East Packages includes B-Line infrastructure east of Hiawatha Avenue, located both in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. The scope of the East Construction Package includes kind of all the core bus rapid transit infrastructure associated with our arterial BRT program. So the most visible of those is the BRT platforms. There will be 30 of those constructed in the East Package at 16 intersections in Minneapolis and St. Paul. A less visible, but nonetheless very important part of the scope is the fiber communication infrastructure that runs underground and links our stations to each other. This infrastructure supports the technology available at our BRT platforms that provides real-time transit information, security cameras, fare collection, and other customer amenities at those BRT platforms. Also in the scope is implementation of transit signal priority at numerous intersections along the corridor. This allows buses to move more quickly through intersections and spend less time at red lights. Additionally, the East package will include locally requested pedestrians and signal improvements, as well as pavement improvements, lane reconfiguration, and bus lane implementation. This work will be funded through cooperative agreements with our local partners, the counties and the cities along the route. So all told, the proposed contract value for the East package, about 73% of it is that core BRT infrastructure, the platforms, the fiber, the transit signal priority. The remaining 27% will be provided by through these agreements with the two counties to bring in those local improvements that complement the B line, improve the pedestrian environment along the corridor. To shed a little bit more light about the local improvements, and these have come up in previous recent business items. These are the ones in the East package located in Hennepin County along Lake Street. So as you can see on this graphic, there are 4 intersections. The blue dots with the kind of black circles around them, those are the 4 intersections that'll have a BRT station at them. But in addition, this segment includes intersection upgrades at all the intersections with the blue dots without the black circle. The whole stretch also includes a mill and overlay. This will improve the pavement condition that the B line as well as general traffic will operate on. There will also be lane restriping, which enables implementation of a westbound bus lane, which will speed up B line service. This graphic shows the locally requested improvements on the other side of the river on Marshall Avenue in St. Paul. So these improvements also include some lane restriping and a segment of westbound bus lane. There's also signal improvements and a traffic signal interconnect to better link the various traffic signals in this segment. And east of Fairview Avenue, the B-line construction is purely BRT infrastructure. There aren't any locally requested scope items in that area. So as we transition into the construction phase of the B-line project, we'll be continuing the engagement that we've been doing throughout the whole process during the planning and engineering phases. The goals of our communication during construction are to make sure that the public along the corridor is aware of what will be constructed, when it will be constructed, and that they know who they can contact when they have questions or concerns about the construction process. And so this effort is led by our Metro Transit Outreach Department, and they'll utilize a lot of different methods to reach different folks. So there'll be a mailing in the very near future to properties within a quarter mile of the East package of the B line. There will be a door knocking effort as well to reach station neighbors so that they're prepared for the construction to come. There will also be a number of electronic communications through our rider alerts, newsletters, websites, and there will be a construction hotline that anybody can call and talk to a real person and get information about the construction process. So just a little bit more about Contract 22P 365, the construction contract for the East package. This work was put out for bid on January 26th of this year. There were 49 total plan holders. Of those, 17 were women, minority, veteran, or disadvantaged business enterprises. In the end, we received 5 bids. Those range from about $18 million to about $22 million. The low, responsive, and responsible bidder was Thomas & Sons, Inc. And as part of the contract that is being proposed with Thompson Sons, We're proposing including a bid alternate that's worth a value of about $663,000. So what a bid alternate is it's essentially work that is additional to the base scope that the council can choose to include or not at the council's discretion. And so in this case, we used the bid alternate technique for the red paint in the bus lanes that'll be on Lake Street. So that red paint is a new area for Metro Transit. We wanted to have some flexibility to include it or not based on price. When we opened the bids, we found that the Thomas & Sons pricing for that red paint was very favorable, and therefore we're recommending including that bid alternate for the red paint in this contract, as we believe it'll encourage better compliance of driver compliance of those bus lanes and provide a better final product for transit customers. Also, on the DBE front, the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity set a DBE goal for this contract of 15%, and they did determine that Thomas & Sons has met that DBE requirement for this contract. So to summarize, business item 2023-72 requested the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 22P365 with Thomas & Sons Construction, Inc. for construction of the Metro B Line East Construction Package in an amount not to exceed $18,681,581. And again, we are requesting a same week action in order to award this contract and start construction in a timely manner. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Frank. Questions, comments from council members? Wow, I'm not used to that for this group. Well, I'm just going to make the comment because you're all new and haven't heard me make this comment, except for Councilmember Chambliss and Pacheco, that I just love this project so much because you want to build a connected system, and if you look at this, the number of lines that this project intersects with really starts to, in my mind, make us a truly connected system. So I just love it. So thank you. With that, I'd entertain a motion then to approve business item 2023-72 same week.
Second.
I'll make the motion.
There you go. Moved by Councilmember Tony Carter, seconded by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there any other discussion?
Yes.
Councilmember
And
Carter.
Simply because I failed to remember to ask before, but I'm noting that we are seeing the DBE goals. Do we see the employment goals as well, and when?
I'm going to call the expert from the audience.
Madam Chair, Council and Committee members, Ashanti Payne, I'm an Assistant Director of the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. The employment goals are established by the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, and they are based on county. The goal for minorities is 32% and 20% for women.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a follow-up on that, are those goals metropolitan and greater Minnesota based, or are they actually unique across counties?
Madam Chair, Council Member, the goals are unique across counties in most situations. So Hennepin and Ramsey County, so to speak, have the same goals. Okay. But rural Minnesota and some of the other metro counties may have a different set of goals.
Thank you very much.
And if I may, like for a project like the Green Line Extension, when we get our quarterly updates, we get updates not just on the DBE, but we also get updates on the workforce. So we can kind of track that over time and see how we're doing, which is as important as having the goals. All right, very good. Any other discussion? Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, members, I know the 21 comes right out here because I've taken it from here to the other side of town, to the uptown, and you really see different communities as you go along. It's an amazing route, 21. There was even a little musical play, I can't remember. Maria Issa was actually in it, It's what the kids did it a long time ago, and I can't remember where it was. We'll have to show it. They all singing doing 21, and they were doing this all the time.
I'd love to see that.
I love all of that. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. So any other discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to business item 2023-75. It's the Metro Green Line Extension Construction Cost Estimating Services Contract. We have Jim Alexander here to present.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Alexander, Project Director for the Green Line Extension. You can refer me my pronouns, he, him, and his, and you can call me Jim. So I have an item for discussion and presentation for a cost estimator. Get into a little background. Just to refresh everyone that may be new here, to our project, 16 new stations for the extension here, and we have a lot of structures, and still inviting folks to go out on a tour if you want to see these structures. A lot of them have been built up to date here, and we're still working on a tunnel, 15 at grade crossings, number of retaining walls, and of course we share with freight about half the alignment. So the background on this is that the cost estimating, we have a need for cost estimating services to help us negotiate change orders. So typically we look for consultant expertise. We also have some in-house from our construction staff, but a lot of reliance on our consultant to advise us on a cost estimate as we get a change order that's coming up, whether it's for civil or systems contracts that we have. Currently, that service is provided by the advanced design consultant that's led by AECOM. They're also the engineer of record on the project, and they currently perform that service. As part of the council's procurement process and Federal Transit Administration guidelines, we look at all of our contracts, and with the extension of the project, we looked at all the contracts to see if there are opportunities to find other avenues for procuring additional firms. And in addition to that, MnDOT came out late last year with a recommendation that you actually have a separation between the engineer of record and the cost estimator. Similar to what Chris had spoken of, there's kind of moving toward that council process of having a separate cost estimator from the engineer of record. So that's what this is recommending to do. I would want to emphasize that the ADC will continue to serve as the engineer of record as we move forward. So just give you a kind of background on some of the major consultants we have on this project. Advanced design consultant, again, that's AECOM's not the sole. There's about 20 consultants on that team, and again, they provide engineer of record services as we move through the construction. We also have a construction management service consultant led by Kimley Horn, and quality management services that helps us on the civil construction led by Braun Intertech, and Venable Construction Law helps us with the construction matters on a legal perspective. Troner helps us with scheduling and also claims associated with the civil and the systems contracts we've talked in the past. Whiffley is a construction cost accountant that helps with that process as well. We have Socatech, which is a nationally recognized forensic engineering firm. We've used them off and on for really technical issues, primarily around the Cedar Isles Condominium Association issues there. And similar to what Chris had said, we essentially all these large projects, we have MnDOT and Hennepin County embedded in our project. So the procurement process, similar to what Chris spoke of, this follows a Brooks Act, where it's a really two-step process where we issue a request for proposals. We did that back in November. There was a pre-proposal meeting held later in November, and two proposals were received. HDR and HNTB were the proposers. And so technical proposals are reviewed first as far as that two-part process. We had an evaluation panel composed of Met Council staff, as well as Hennepin County, and MnDOT was on that panel as well. And they determined HNTB's technical proposal was the most advantageous to move forward into negotiations on cost. And so tonight I'm bringing forward an item to consider HNTB as the cost estimator. And I would just add that I didn't have it on the slide here, but the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity had identified a goal of 18% on this contract, and it was confirmed that HNTV did meet that goal. So tonight, request that the Met Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 22P3036 with HNTV to provide construction cost estimating services for the Metro Green Line Extension Project in an amount not to exceed $12,708,234.98. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Good. Thank you, Jim. Are there questions or comments from council members? All right, my only comment is I'm glad to see this. It's obviously something that came out of the peer review, and I think that it just really provides another, set of eyes on the project from that perspective and good practice. So very much appreciated. With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-75.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you, Jim. And we are on to our final business item for the evening, business item 2023-73, which is a joint same week item, and it's April Special Transportation Budget Amendment. We have Ed Petrie here. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. My name is Ed Petrie. I'm Director of Finance with Metro Transit. My pronouns are he, him, his, and you can call me Mr. Petrie, or you can call me Ed, which I'd prefer. I just want to let you know, with budget amendments, we will be coming before you generally on a quarterly basis. We generally come, the council adopts a budget in December, and then on a quarterly basis, we generally will come forward before you, bringing projects forward when they're available and when the funding is available and when they're ready to go. This amendment this evening, though, is business item number 2023-73. It's a joint transportation. It's the same week item. It is for an April special transportation budget amendment. So it's out of our normal cycle. This amendment this evening is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2023 budget or the Unified Budget Amendment as indicated and in accordance with the attached table. The amendment this evening is for the Metro Gold Line. This amendment will recognize $239,345,549 in federal section 5309 capital investment grant funds, or it's the FFGA for the Metro Gold Line. This project is identified in the CIP. This amendment basically allows us to recognize the FFGA funds if it is signed, and it will bring it into the capital budget as soon as it is possible to bring it in. So as I stated, this is a same week item. The action tonight would then allow us then to, if it is signed, bring it then forward to the management committee and the council on Wednesday. So we're very happy about the full funding grant, very hopeful that it will be signed, and we would like to bring it in forward into our capital budget as soon as possible. So with that, Madam Chair, committee members, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Carter.
I'd like to make a motion.
This is a good thing.
It is a good thing. Motion made by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll see you next quarter.
All right. We did get through our business pretty quickly tonight, so I think it's an absolutely lovely evening out. So without objection, we are adjourned.